about we do that?
You want to go from where you're reading?
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So where which line is that?
This is chapter 14.
Okay.
No, there's some in the next room on the shelf.
You got the 7th canto?
Part 1 or 2?
This is the 7th canto, part 3, and I'll get another one. So you have a copy.
Yeah.
We can do what we did yesterday again. Very nice.
Okay.
Very nice, huh?
Very well. Where are we? 14, 639.
Yeah. Hare Krishna to everybody. All glories to Soul Fun. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 7, Chapter 14, Text 39, Ideal Family Life. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Drishtva Tesham Mito Nrinam Avajanan Natmanam Matam. Let's break that down. Vasnana Atmatam Nripa Veda Adishu Hare Archa Priyaya Kavivi Kutaha Vishvatesham Mitondrinam Avagyanat Matam Nipa Vitadishu Hare Archa
Ketadishu Harer Archa.
Priyaya Kavivi Kutaha
Kavir Krita. Drishtvatesham Mitodrinam.
Vishvatesham Mitondrinam
Avagyanat Matam Ripa.
Avagyanat Matam Nipa
Ketadishu Harer Archa.
Vitadishu Hare Archa
Priyayai Kavibir Krita.
Priyaya Kavivi Kutaha
Drishtvatesham Mitodrinam.
Avagyanat Matam Nipa
Ketadishu Harer Archa. Priyayai Kavibir Krita.
Anybody else?
No, it's just so we're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 7, Chapter 14, entitled Ideal Family Life. This is text 39. Text 39, Chapter 14, Canto 7 of Srimad Bhagavatam. So 7:14:39. If anyone else would like to recite the verse. Thank you.
Vishvatesham Mitondrinam
Vishvatesham Mitondrinam.
Avajana Matam Ripa
Avagyanat Matam Nripa.
Tretadishu Harer Archa
Ketadishu Harer Archa.
Kriyayai Kavivi Krita
Priyayai Kavivi Krita.
No?
Would anyone else like to recite the verse?
See a lot of people smiling.
Yeah. Okay, so we can go to the word for word if you'd like.
Drishtva,
Drishtva,
after practically seeing
after practically seeing
Tesham
Tesham
among the Brahmins and Vaishnavas,
among the Brahmins and Vaishnavas,
Mitha,
Mita, mutually,
Vinam,
Vinam,
of human society,
of human society,
Jnana Atmatam,
Avijnana Atmatam,
the mutually disrespectful behavior,
the mutually disrespectful behavior,
Nipa,
Nipa,
O king,
O king,
Treta Adishu,
Treta Adishu,
beginning from Treta Yuga,
beginning from Treta Yuga,
Hare,
Hare,
of the Supreme Personality of Godhead,
of the Supreme Personality of Godhead,
Archa,
Archa,
the deity worship in the temple,
the deity worship in the temple,
Priyayani,
Viyayai,
for the purpose of introducing the method of worship,
for the purpose of introducing the method of worship,
Kavivi,
Kavivi,
by learned persons,
by learned persons,
Taha,
Pita,
has been done.
has been done.
Translation. My dear king, when great sages and saintly persons saw mutually disrespectful dealings at the beginning of Treta Yuga, deity worship in the temple was introduced with all paraphernalia. So please repeat. My dear king,
My dear king,
when great sages and saintly persons
when great sages and saintly persons
saw mutually disrespectful dealings
saw mutually disrespectful dealings
at the beginning of Treta Yuga,
at the beginning of Treta Yuga,
deity worship in the temple was introduced
deity worship in the temple was introduced
with all paraphernalia.
with all paraphernalia.
By his divine grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila
Hare Krishna.
as it is said in Srimad Bhagavatam 12.352, Kritaya Dhyayato Vishnu Kritayam Jajato Makai Dvapare Parichayayam Paratathare.
Cute.
Whatever result one obtained in Satyayug by meditating on Vishnu, in Treta Yuga by performing sacrifices, and in Dwapara Yuga by serving the Lord's lotus feet, one can also obtain in Kali Yuga simply by chanting the Hare Krishna Maha. Satyayuga, every person was spiritually advanced, and there was no envy between great personalities. Gradually, however, because of material contamination with the advance of the ages, disrespectful dealings appeared even among Brahmins and Vaishnavas. Actually, an advanced Vaishnava is to be respected more than Vishnu, as stated in Padma Purana, Radhananam Sarvesham Vishnu Radhananam. Of all kinds of worship of Lord Vishnu is the best. Tasmat Prataram Devi Hariyanam Samarjanam. Recommended more than worship of Vishnu is worship of the Vaishnava. Even the Prabhu, you want to next the rest of the purport, or the next, at least next paragraph.
Formerly, all activities were performed in connection with Vishnu. But after Satya Yuga, there were symptoms of disrespectful dealings among Vaishnavas. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur has said that a Vaishnava is he who has helped others become Vaishnavas. An example of one who has converted many others into Vaishnavas is Narada Muni, a powerful Vaishnava who has converted others into Vaishnavas is to be worshipped. But because of material contamination, sometimes such an exalted Vaishnava is disrespected by other minor Vaishnavas. When great saintly persons saw this contamination, they introduced worship of the deity in the temple. This began in Treta Yuga and was especially prominent in Dvapara Yuga, Dvapare Parichayayam. But in Kali Yuga, worship of the deity is being neglected. Therefore, chanting of the Hare Krishna mantra is more powerful than deity worship. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu set a practical example in that he did not establish any temples or deities, but he profusely introduced the Sankirtan movement. Therefore, Krishna consciousness preachers should give more stress to the Sankirtan movement, especially by distributing transcendental literature more and more. This helps the Sankirtan movement. Whenever there is a possibility to worship the deity, we may establish many centers, but generally we should give more stress to the distribution of transcendental literature, for this will be more effective in converting people to Krishna consciousness.
He said in Srimad Bhagavatam 11:247, Acharayam Devahara Hare Pujam Yashara
Chanyeshu Savakta.
A person who is very faithfully engaged in the worship of the deity in the temple does not know how to behave toward devotees or people in general. It's called a Prakriti Bhakta or Krishna Adhikari. A Prakriti devotee or neophyte devotee is still on the material platform. He certainly engages in worshiping the deity, but he cannot appreciate the activities of a pure devotee. It has actually been seen that even an authorized devotee is engaged in the service of the Lord by preaching the mission of Krishna consciousness, sometimes criticized by neophyte devotees. Such neophytes are described in Krishna Chakravarti Part 4. Sarva Prani Saman Nana Mar Agadya Spardha Di Matam Bhagavat Bhakti Maiva Patram.
For those who cannot properly appreciate the activities of authorized devotees, deity worship is the only way for spiritual advancement. In the Chaitanya Charitamrita Antya 7.11, it is clearly said, Krishna Bhakti Punya Nahe Pravasana. Without being authorized by Krishna, one cannot preach the holy name of the Lord throughout the entire world. Nevertheless, a devotee who does so is criticized by neophyte devotees. Kanishta Adhikari, who are on the lower stages of devotional service. For them, deity worship is strongly recommended.
Vishwa Tesham Mitonrinam Avajyanat Matam Nitaha Chitadeshu Hare Archa Yaya Kavivi. Translation again. My dear king, when great sages and saintly persons saw mutually disrespectful dealings at the beginning of Treta Yuga, deity worship in the temple was introduced with all paraphernalia. Yanakim Vasya Galam Vidaya So this is almost the end of this chapter, Ideal Family Life, and we're reading text 39. But it's a wonderful chapter, as are all the chapters in this great nectarian literature. But this chapter has been very powerful reading in the last several weeks for us, because in one sense, everybody is looking for ideal family life. Most people in this age, they're at a certain age, they enter family life with their own spouse, children, and then that grows into more relatives and grandchildren. And even from birth, we are part of some family. We all enter into some family. That's how nature works. That's how God, Krishna, has arranged the whole system of procreation. We come into family life, we stay in family life, then we start our own family, and that leads to further developments. And in this way, generations of humanity, they carry on an individual basis. We're simply moving from one family to another, or one version of family life to another version of family life. And then when this family life is over, as it is guaranteed for each one of us, and we have a change of bodies, then there's another family life that begins. And the way things are arranged, we actually don't remember our previous family life anymore. This is how nature works. It's how Krishna has created things. So we forget about our previous family lives, and we get absorbed in our new family lives. It would be actually difficult, very difficult, if we somehow, by God's arrangement, if we were to remember all our previous family lives also. We'd be then remembering our previous parents and spouses and sons and daughters and relatives. And then we'd be thinking about pastimes with them, or wanting to spend time with them. And then now we've got a different family that perhaps has no connection with our previous family. And then if you go back a few generations or a few lifetimes, then there's so many families that we have to start thinking about. And it can become very distracting, actually very disturbing kind of a situation. You can imagine even this life, if I've got an audience and the audience has 10 different persons that I'm interacting with at the same time, and trying to do, simultaneous, say, coaching for 10 different people without paying attention to one person appropriately, and it can become a very disturbing situation. Nobody's satisfied, nobody's really getting the proper attention. There's no depth to any kind of relations or interaction. So brings us back to wanting this ideal family life. If you don't have ideal family life, then what we're reading about here in this verse and purport, this is what happens. I'll just read a few words again. This mutually disrespectful dealings, this is what starts to happen. So this can happen at younger ages, when the children, when they're becoming teenagers, and then they have disagreements with their siblings or with their parents, but it becomes a disrespectful dealing. And then they cannot stand being with their parents, and then they want to move out. It's not uncommon to have that kind of an occurrence. And then if you get married, then as we know, especially in this age, after some years, then instead of having this two persons who are madly in love with each other, now we have two persons who are starting to become disrespectful. And that leads to more disturbance and quarrels and separations and divorce. So this is the age of quarrel. So this mutually disrespectful dealing comes in our lives. Pretty much it's guaranteed it's going to happen. This is the age of Kali. This verse in purport, Prabhupada is describing how authorized devotees of the Lord, Vaishnavas, like Narada Muni and people coming in, great Vaishnavas, devotees, saintly persons, sages coming in that line, their only concern is the happiness of other people, these great saints and sages. They don't live for any other reason except to benefit other people. And for that reason, they get empowered to help people all over the world take to the correct path of life, path of God consciousness, Krishna consciousness. And they sacrifice their lives and becomes evident. We see that in Prabhupada's situation. We see that in the lives of great saintly persons like the other Vaishnavacharyas. We see that in the example of Lord Jesus Christ and other such personalities. They dedicate their lives to benefit others. But as time goes on, they become the object of envy, unfortunately. Prabhupada many times said about Jesus Christ that what was his harm? What has he done? He didn't do anything wrong. He sacrificed his life for the benefit of others, giving them the greatest gift. And yet, this disrespect and envious dealings, they entered into his life, and Prabhupada talks about how he was betrayed and tortured and disrespected in so many ways that are actually very disturbing. Even now to hear about those things or read about those things or see some kind of a explanation of those kinds of behaviors. So it's not at all uncommon, this kind of disrespectful dealings towards great Vaishnavas. You see that in the example of Prahlad Maharaj, another great devotee, who was affected in his transformation by Narada Muni. We're reading about that. And Prahlad Maharaj, a faultless person, but who was envious of him, who became a disturbing element in his life, is his own father. His own father became very disturbed by his own son and tried to create all kinds of disturbances for him. And then we know about Haridas Thakur, his situation. So this is not surprising, and it's something that we have to deal with without becoming disturbed ourselves. It's like Jesus did not become disturbed. Prabhupada, anytime that he was dealt with disrespectfully, he just was not disturbed at all. And this is actually one of the great glories of saintly persons, that no matter how they're dealt with, they're not affected by it. And they continue to pour out love and affection and their blessings and well wishes for the others. So there's many other wonderful points in this purport. I've just said a few things, but there's many other points, so maybe others can elaborate on these points. We can have discussion, we can have questions. There's a fair amount of writing here about the chanting of the Maha Mantra being much more powerful than daily worship. This is a very important point that is made, that Mahaprabhu, he set a practical example that he did not establish any temple or deity, and by this Prabhupada is meaning big temples for the public, but he introduced the chanting of the holy name, the Sankirtan movement. And then when there was a possibility to establish deity worship, then Prabhupada is saying then we can establish deity worship in centers and so on and so forth too. But the distribution here is the Sankirtan movement. We've heard many times that the Brihat Mridanga, or the very powerful component of the distribution of the Maha Mantra, is the distribution of this transcendental literature, which Prabhupada has given us so much literature, so many books, so much has been published. And all these publications, they help people to understand the philosophy, the reality of life, and also then to take up the God conscious, Krishna conscious lifestyle based on the congregational chanting of the holy name of the Lord, which is what all of us assembled. We are learning how to do that, hopefully with less offenses and more purely, with this foundation of our daily existence as the chanting of this Maha Mantra, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. We're also learning how to do simple deity worship so we can have an ideal home life, ideal family life, kind of a closely connected. But most of us are living in our ashrams, Vyasa or home ashrams. And in our home ashrams, we want this ideal family life. So as we read in this purport, there's to be Krishna conscious means to do all activities in connection with Vishnu, our God. He's our eternal Father, eternal well-wisher, eternal friend, everything that we are looking for in life is actually in connection with God or Vishnu. That's what we are looking for. Because without God, without Vishnu, without Krishna, life becomes pretty empty, meaningless. That's how things are designed. That's how we set up. We're part and parcels of Krishna. The part is meant to serve the whole. And when we do this in our homes, in our home ashrams, then life actually becomes very satisfying and very undisturbed. So there is a solution to minimize or eliminate disturbances and this disrespectful dealings by having Krishna as the center of all activities, even within our home situations. So, sorry, it's been a long time since I've been in a situation with more than just two persons.
I'd say we have about 20 here altogether. I appreciate very much where you went with that, and this is such a especially sublime purport from Srila Prabhupada. You know, he's referring to some personal experience, you know, in a discreet, gentlemanly way. And well, just last night, I was on this thing called Facebook more than I should have been. But no, I read something from a Prabhu that completely related to what you said. It was actually very enlightening. Other things weren't enlightening. But so it was, I'll say the name. It was Krishna Kripa Prabhu. I mean, he was an intellectual for decades.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. So he, you know, I don't know, maybe he's in New York now. He's just like full representative of Narada Muni, traveling all around the planet, maybe especially North America, and he does Harinam and distributes books. So he was reflecting. He said that apparently I think he's about my age, about 60, something like that. And his father passed away when he was like 12. So he just was thinking, because there he is in New York, and he's distributing books, and he goes like, okay, maybe one of these fellows in their late 40s or so was my father, like that. And then there I am distributing him a book. But he was just having that reflection while he was on Sankirtan book distribution. Just like, yeah, there could be like so many living entities and so many formats. Like they could go that this was my grandfather 3 lifetimes ago, or I was her aunt 2 lifetimes ago, and in this species or that species. So he was just reflecting, and it moved me. And then you just spoke kind of right about that. And relatedly, back in late 80s, early 90s, I was living in the villages of a group called the Druze, whose actual name is Muahidun, which translates as Sanatana Dharma. But one thing, even not just our anecdotal experiences, as I've written about, but even modern research on transmigration, reincarnation, a lot of the examples that can't be explained by any materialistic science are from the Druze communities. And it was quite common for us to be like, be invited graciously, with wonderful hospitality into a home, and there'd be like a 4-year-old there. And the parents would explain that he was the grandfather of our neighbor in a village in Syria. But then the 4-year-old would have, like, the borders aren't even open with Syria or Lebanon, but the 4-year-old would have exact recollection of the villages. And so I like how you brought that out. Like, we're all looking for ideal family life. And so fortunately, Bhagavatam gives us guidance for this, not just while we're in this body, but for our eternal life. And then also, you identified the main thing in the way is envy. The main thing in the way. And that we might say we could say that's the distinguishing. That's what distinguishes spiritual life or spiritual world from material life, material world. That propensity to devalue others. The propensity to devalue others. And to the extent that my heart is clean and pure, Nirmat Saranam, there's no propensity to devalue others. And material life is characterized by. So thanks for what you expressed.
No, for freedom from fault finding.
Yeah.
Actually becomes a burden. It becomes a burden when we are in a situation where fault finding is present, or envy is present, or envy is noticed, or if we see in our heart that there's some disturbance like that, that becomes very distasteful, and one who's traversing the path of ideal family life, this life, and our eternal families, it becomes just like if one gets some kind of a dirty substance thrown on the body. We want to take a bath immediately. We don't want to be dirty in that sense. So similarly, when one observes this kind of disturbing, disrespectful, envious behavior in others or ourselves, then we should actually become not wanting to be in that situation, which is what the Shastra says also, to leave those kinds of situations. And we should eliminate those kinds of feelings or behaviors uh, in our own hearts. And if those kinds of feelings exist in our heart, then we should do everything we can to free ourselves of this kind of contamination, which is what Prabhupada uses the word in this book, contamination. Thank you for your comments. Anybody else in our international community? Mother Malini? No, who's that? You want to dislodge? Go ahead.
This is Keith, Bhakti Keith.
Hello. Yeah, it was really nice. I'm just gonna explain some little small experience of mine, and then I'll ask some questions, 2 small questions. Yeah, so I really appreciate what you're saying about not being envious and devaluing, respecting each other. Comes to mind is my uncle, one of my uncles. He would be like classic big feeling guy, right? He's big, strong fighter, really big opinions. He's kind of racist and homophobic, and he says all these funny comments and stuff like that. And I just noticed, for whatever reason, I just always liked him as a person. For some reason, I liked his personality, you know. And just behind all the rude and crude comments and stuff like that, and I can sense that he feels that from me. You know, people have been looking down on him probably for his whole life. You know, he one time told me that he was a kid fighting the dogs off to get food, right? So then he fights his family, fights his friends, fighting everybody his whole life. And so over the last little bit, that's what came to me, was that, you know, he has such extreme opinions on everything. You know, it's because he legitimately really cares. It's because he has a big heart. And it's just, he's expressing his care through his pain, through his struggles, and through this, you know, and this very disrespectful, belittling material atmosphere. And I can see that he recognizes that in me, and I can feel love from him for that. And so I guess this is my own little tiny glimpse of that realization, I guess. And yeah, so my vision of family is, I have my wife. This is one person to slowly sift through the material consciousness to establish a truly spiritual, I am a divine child, you are a divine child. We're a team, best friends, to work through this with each other. And we learn to treat our children like that and to relate to society in that way. And I think that that's a very wonderful, I appreciate my vision that was given of that from being connected to the devotees and Srila Prabhupada and Krishna. And so now I'll get to my questions. Yeah, so for example, like I see my nephew, you know, he's 4 years old. So it's a little confusing how to show a 4-year-old proper respect as an eternal spirit soul when he's doing some things that are not so intelligent, and though sometimes several times he speaks and it's like, boom, I can tell it's his soul, like it's deep wisdom or a deep, really true communication. I can see it's coming from his soul. And so how to like, I'll use a specific example. Somebody was sleeping. I asked him not to run. Then he kind of half ran down the stairs, and he came and told me, he said, my brain told me to run anyway, right? But so at first I was wondering, is it like it kind of came out of me to be like, well, you can learn how to control your mind. And I didn't know, I was thinking afterward, I didn't know if that was kind of like too much for him to be able to process at that age, you know? And then I guess the other thing that is coming up for me recently, there's some sort of family tragedy or struggle that just recently came up. And I'm noticing within myself that I'm kind of like becoming more aloof with my connection, seeing them as family, you know, that emotional connection, and more wanting to relate to them as spiritual family. But they see that kind of like detachment as being they're used to relating on the material plane, and they see that as being kind of like they interpret it like I don't care. You get what I mean? So how to navigate these? Sorry if my question was too long.
So it's a 24/7 process, it is not. Every time we interact with anybody at all, which could be hundreds of times a day, how to deal with every situation in a way that Krishna is pleased. Because if Krishna is pleased, it's like watering the root of the tree. Then all the leaves, branches, twigs, everybody else is taken care of. And it's a fact, it's the reality. Krishna consciousness is all about what is factual, what is reality, how things really are. And we were just reading the other day, Prabhupada was describing Krishna consciousness, defining it as the way things are. You know, so this is the reality of living our lives in such a way, and making, first going to this 4 stages of, as we've talked, and I'm sure you've presented in your various teachings. We go through the stages of not being aware of what is the best thing to do, the unconscious and competent. And the next one is conscious and competent. In other words, we're aware of what we should be doing and what we shouldn't be doing, but we don't quite know how to do it. We make lots of mistakes and bang our heads against the wall and feel badly, or I didn't do that the way I should have. I knew better, but I didn't quite do it the way I should have done it. So that's conscious incompetence. And then
I can relate to that state, yes.
Where we've become pretty good at doing things in a way that God is pleased, and hopefully we've done it so well that others are pleased by our behavior, by our thoughts, our intentions. And of course, the unconscious competence, it comes naturally, and that's how it is with pure devotees like Srila Prabhupada. And when we see Prabhupada, the way he interacted with every different situation that I'm aware of, whether it's little children or elderly persons or professors or priests or young disciples or men or women or strangers or stewardesses in young flights or other religious personalities, parents of his disciples, politicians, every interaction is perfect. And you just can't find any fault in the way Srila Prabhupada deals with every situation. So that's, the pure devotee, the mastery, the unconscious competence. So we have to go through these stages, and some days we may feel that we're doing better than other days, but it's a process. That's what life is all about. You just have to We can't stop living it. So we just have to live the life in the best way possible. Then we have the guidance of others who are on the same path. We have the guidance of Srila Prabhupada who has given the teachings. There's audios, there's videos. Anybody else?
Say something that I was thinking of.
Can you come close? I don't know the word.
That's fine. Just make sure you speak loud enough so they can hear them. You're good.
I think Srila Prabhupada has said that when you deal with family members, that you, it looks like you're agreeing with them, or you say yes, yes, everything is just that you like, but in your heart, you know that it's not, you know. So you don't want to create waves, you know, with your immediate family members that don't understand where you're coming from. But at the same time, you have to understand yourself where you're coming from, and you have to know, you know, deep inside what it is you value. But at the same time, what is it? You see the soul, and then again, like my husband's saying, it's a process of developing that consciousness that all of these living entities that are in the different bodies, different forms of my father, my mother, they're all actually part and parcel of Krishna. They're all spirit souls. They're all related to Krishna. They're related to me as a as a family member, part of Krishna's family. You know, but and they're expecting things from you, right? They're always wanting things from you. They expect you to behave in a certain way, but this is the whole disease in the material world, is that we all want to be controllers. Your mother wants to control you, your father wants to control you, I want to control this and that, you know, that's the disease. We always want to be right. Our opinion has to be most valuable, but it's not the way it is. That's the envy. That's the envy that's got us here. So yeah, it's very complex. But Krishna will, you know, take you through as you keep on practicing, keep on chanting Hare Krishna, keep on reading Srila Prabhupada's books every day. I mean, still, we've been practicing for almost 50 years. Still, every time I open Prabhupada's books, I think, oh my gosh, did I read this before? Have I ever heard this before? You know, so there's spiritual life is very dynamic, and it's constantly changing. We're constantly learning, and we're constantly learning how to apply what we've heard. You know, what I've been hearing for years now. Sometimes I think, oh, now that's what I'm supposed to be doing. That's how I'm supposed to be applying it. You know, so don't expect that you're going to become a pure devotee overnight. I mean, you may. That would be that we all pray for that, but
that could be plan A, but let's not be attached to it.
Plan B is a gradual, what Srila Bhaktisiddhanta said, progress is a gradual series of adjustments in the right direction. That's progress. So
I appreciate your questions and sharing, Keith, and your comments, Mandavi and Naveen. And like, I guess the essence I'm getting is like, actually, see, they said like it's complex. Life is complex, relationships are complex, and it's childish to try to oversimplify. The principles, though, are simple. Like that's where you started. Yatatur Milani Shepchanena. What are the root of the truth? And that you gave me, you know, there's one chapter in this part of Bhagavatam, the perfect person. This chapter is the ideal family life. There's another chapter, the perfect person, like that. So you establish Prabhupada as that, and just like his dealings were just like smoothly, effortlessly, and just like, wow, it's because he's connected with the root. He's connected with the very substratum of everyone's existence. So he just naturally has inspiration how to relate. So the principles are very simple. And then with simple and profound realization of the principles, then we're inspired how to respond to the complexities of life and 4-year-olds and family members, how to respond to the complexities with in such a way where everyone is moving closer to what are we doing. Ladini Shakti has her hand up.
Hare Krishna. I also want to comment something to this discussion, but before that, I want to say, Naveen Krishna Prabhu, thank you for your class. I really did, and I was hoping to come to see you in lab. And
We hope to see you before your stay is over in Alaska on this trip.
yeah, it was definitely my plan to see you today, but it didn't happen. And and yeah, to the comment from Keith and to this discussion, like when I am hearing, like I am like so like detached from my family that my family feels like I don't care about them. It sounds like artificial to me. And I'm not saying, Keith, that we are coming from that place, but I immediately have like this alarm because the devotee is like dear to everyone and everyone is very dear to him. And like detaching from the family to me means like I love everyone as much as I love my family members. Not that I am like starting to loving my family members less. And then the devotee is like compassionate towards everyone for the spiritual suffering, but also like for the material suffering. So it's like difficult for me to imagine that someone would feel like neglected by the devotee if the devotee is like really coming from this like caring, compassionate place. And even now there is like 4 Sattva seminars coming up. That's amazing. And then in the seminars like the Raghavinda Prabhu and Malini, they are never like, oh, that's just like your material suffering, you know. It's just like, you know, you are like frustrated because you are sick, you know, that's Maya. Not at all. Like there is so much compassion in the seminars. And yeah, and I don't think it's like fake compassion. I don't think like that Malini or Dira Govinda are like faking the compassion to like trick the people to Krishna consciousness. So these thoughts are coming up to me. Like I am imagining that the more we move towards the pure devotional service, the more we have compassion for the fallen conditioned souls, and not in like some sort of like naive or utopic way. You know, of course, like the disease, old age, and all that is going to be there, but it doesn't mean that the spirit soul is not realizing itself as a spirit soul. It's not like going through immense suffering through that, and that's very painful. Like Prahlad Maharaj is praying that like all the spirit souls are liberated before he can go back, because he has so much like compassion for everyone, and he's detached from his family life because he doesn't care if it's his father or mother or a frog or someone like completely else. Hare Krishna.
Thank you. Thank you for your sharing your comments.
Well, I was very moved by your comments, Ladini Shakti, and that right from the beginning, that yes, like this, as we develop in genuine spiritual life, bhakti yoga, Krishna consciousness, it's not that we don't care about family. Like our realization about whose family expands. And yeah, and this verse, this was spoken. Well, this is all about Prahlad Maharaj, this whole canto.
Yeah.
And Prahlad Maharaj, Prabhupada often quote, that's the devotional soul, paradukkha dukkha, feeling this is the essence of empathy and compassion, experiencing someone else's pain as one's own pain. And there's a lecture I heard from Prabhupada. He goes, so that's the devotional soul, paradukkha dukkha. And Prabhupada says, he says, in the material life, we are parasukha dukkha. When someone else is miserable, we are happy. And then Prabhupada said, of course we don't say that. It's just like, so experts at think psychology. of course, I feel so bad for you. But of course, when someone's doing not well, and when someone's doing well, then we want to bring them down. But of course, we don't say those things. So, and yeah, so sometimes Prabhupada defines sannyas as expanding one, it's not about leaving one's family. That's external. It's about expanding one's conception to the point where all living entities are family. And I genuinely cultivate love and compassion for all of them. So I really appreciate what you shared, Ladina, there, that it's, that, yeah, it's like my take to spiritual life, then I become callous and apathetic and uncaring. No, just then the heart becomes soft the more we get into bhakti yoga, but not in a sectarian way, because this person's related to me biologically. Like that, then we expand to a non-Vijayavina something conception. Hare Krishna.
If I can just say one thing to it too, though, because I want to validate what Keith is saying about his family, feeling that he's becoming detached from them. Two things. One is that Srila Prabhupada often eulogized his Western disciples, especially because of their detachment. Because it is a step in the right direction, actually, because we've been so attached in the material world, so attached to things, so attached to people, family members, or designations in the material world, that to take a step back from that is a beginning. Is definitely a beginning, and it's necessary. So when you start feeling that, what is they say when you're on the airplane, put your oxygen mask on first. You've got to save yourself first. You've got to clear your understanding of things first before you can start planting the seeds of, okay, yes, we're all brothers and sisters in Krishna's family. That will come, later. But right now, yeah, you do find yourself going back and it says somewhere in Bhagavad Gita that, how does a person that's self-realized walk, and how does he talk? And in that verse, purport Prabhupada talks about, you look on the street, you're walking, and you think, I'm different than those people. Not that you're feeling superior, but you're feeling a relief from the clutches of material nature. So that's going to be there, and that's actually valuable in your moving forward. So I wouldn't discount that. The other thing I was going to say, the idea of family life, I was thinking how Prabhupada always says ultimately we need to become part of Krishna's family. Like you're saying that all of us are part of Krishna's family, but the real goal, not that we do that by disregarding other people, but the real goal is ultimately is to think of going back to Goloka Vrindavan and being in Krishna's family there, ultimately. That's a long way off for somebody like me, but ultimately that's the real family, but that's the eternal family where we don't get these material bodies that are encumbering us in so many ways, but we enjoy eternal life with Krishna and his cowherd boys and cowherd girls and his mother and father and his family. We're part of his family.
Thank you, Mother Madhavi. Mother Malini.
Thank you, Naveen Krsna Prabhu. It's was nice to hear your class. Okay, yeah, thank you. And I was thinking during your class how I always admire your family life. And when I hear sometimes Mother Madhavi described, like as a family, you have kirtan together, your children are, worshiping deities, you exchange with them about deity worship, you exchange with them about, you share with your grandchildren are also Krishna conscious. It seems like very ideal family life, and ideal family life doesn't mean, material happiness, I'm sure. I'm sure that's not there. So it was very appropriate to hear that from you because for me, you're an example of that. And it's nice to see you I hope you're recovered from your surgery.
Yes, we hope to spend more time with all of you now that the veil of COVID-19 has lifted a little bit.
Mhm.
So and it's nice to see you actually looking very healthy and happy,
Mhm, I am
conscious. So
happy.
it's good to see you like that.
Sometimes it takes.
Something that um, you know, we're very fortunate to have the examples of Narada Muni and Prahlad. We talked about Prahlad Maharaj and Prabhupada and Vaishnavacharyas like Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, Lord Jesus Christ. These are all personalities with global agendas. You know, their agenda is certainly family, you know, at the minute level, but they're thinking on a constant basis, includes the entire globe, the whole, you know, the 8 billion persons, but also the other species of life. Nobody's left out in their thinking. Everybody's included. And their vision includes the entire planet from the, you know, peaks of the tallest mountains to the bottom of the deepest oceans and all the land, water, fire, air, ether in between. Their vision includes everybody becoming Krishna conscious, everybody getting to chant the holy name of the Lord, everybody getting to honor Krishna's remnants for purification, everybody seeing transcendent understanding through their teaching, the writings. So the way I understand it, they never reduce their thinking below a complete global family that includes everybody. It just doesn't go away from their consciousness. It's just always there. And somehow we have to plug into that consciousness, that vision, to see the entire world as our family and become their well-wishers and just have good thoughts for everybody and think of ways to reach out to them as you do in the Sattva community. But if our vision always includes uh, connecting to the vision of the acharyas, like Srila Prabhupada, and you know, Krishna consciousness, Prabhupada talks about also, it's a practice. Consciousness is practicing a way of thinking, right? So it's also practicing on a daily basis how to think of the entire global family as our family. So that practice, that can be by prayers, it can be just by discussion, it can be um, some private moments that we have between ourselves and Srila Prabhupada and the Acharyas, just somehow connecting to this vision and feeling this sense of um, um, good thoughts for all the people in the world and thinking of their benefit. So I think we're just very fortunate to be connected to such great personalities with such great visions, and praying that that rubs off on us more and more. So, and then at the same time maintaining this very humble, insignificant position for ourselves, that, you know, we're ready to offer respect to all others, and we have no desire for any kind of respect for ourselves. We just want to see others become happy. We don't care about our own happiness. You know, these kind of things is what we learn from these great personalities. So.
Yes, thank you. It seems that, you know, like the core of all quarrel, the core of all hypocrisy, the core of all drama is envy, like you were sharing in the beginning. And it seems that one step to go towards that all-encompassing compassion is to start where we are at and identify envy and approach the Lord with our envy. It's not pretending it's not there, because it is there as long as we're in a material world. You know, for some of us, we're in a material world. But it seems that, yeah, to really know that if I'm here, I'm envious, and then to own that envy, to know that's what's separating me from the Lord, and always have separated me from the Lord, lifetime after lifetimes after lifetime after lifetime. And it seems that at least it's a step towards freeing myself from the envy. Yeah.
Okay.
I think it's good to be able to acknowledge that and not feel afraid of it, you know, that because we're in company with everyone, every one of us, like you're saying, every one of us is here in this material world because of envy. So I know I felt like before, well, I'm so terrible. I have this envy. I have this, you know, this. But actually, it's all right, and it's not a judgment on anyone else. It's just okay. We're all in this together. You know, we've all got this disease, so let's help each other to get rid of that disease.
I appreciate what you're saying, and it seems that that very disease, when we embrace it, can become like the greatest boon to come closer to Krishna,
Yes, I think
really, and come closer to all human beings by acknowledging and being, and like, yeah, I am envious. Every thought, if we analyze them, we can see like, oh, that's envy. Oh, I'm so envious. I'm so sinful. I'm so wretched.
Mhm.
You know? And then from that place, in fact, by Naveen Prabhu was saying, by feeling insignificant, Prabhupada, I think, used that very words, like feeling so insignificant.
Mhm.
Yeah. And it seems we have an opportunity to come closer to Krishna from our defect, not so much from our qualification, because our qualification is so nil and zero and
Very good way to see it.
so much unqualification and not much qualification. So it seems that through those, through those parts of our hearts that's so unbearable, because we so much fight them, because our ego, our false ego, wants something different, that we have a doorway to the spiritual world. Yeah.
I was thinking about Keith's uncle. That's envy. You know, your uncle is speaking like this about everyone else. I know somebody like that too. My brother is very much like that as well. And it's actually a sign of insecurity on his own part. And you know, trying to lift himself up by dragging everyone else down, right? But if you come across with love, like Melanie is saying, you come across that, you know, or like I was saying, that I have this problem too, you know, maybe you don't have to say it, but you know, if you're thinking in your heart, yes, with that compassion, that yes, I understand where you're coming from. I understand your need to feel loved and respected and valued, you know. We all have this. So how can I give this to you? How can I show you that you're valuable?
It's not just pointing the finger. You're criticizing me.
Yeah, quit criticizing me.
Like, yeah, I'm struggling with that.
Yeah.
Basically, too.
And that'll help them again. It may be incremental, but you can gently bring him back, you know, to finding the good points in others, you know, and because but he has to feel that from you first. That I find, like you said, you love, somehow you like his character. Got something, because we all do. We all have something good in us. We're all parts of Krishna. We have good qualities. they're just, like my husband was saying, covered over by so much mud and dirt. So we have to try to uncover.
I'm thinking in this discussion of Rupa Goswami's Nectar of Instruction that's given to us by Srila Prabhupada. And so there's a description that the self-realized person, sometimes I would say, sometimes it's seen as the self-realized person doesn't criticize. But that's not what it says. It's the self-realized person, Krishna conscious person, is devoid of the propensity to criticize. Such an important distinction. Let's say if we look at our Acharya, Srila Prabhupada, Bhakti Siddhanta, Bhakti Vinod Thakur, they never criticized. What? They did plenty of criticism, even in this purport, in such a discreet way.
Yeah.
So it's so precise, devoid of just what you're talking about, devoid of the propensity. Like material life is, yeah, I want to criticize, I want to gossip about you, I'm going to slander you. I need grossly or subtly, I need to try to bring you down in some shadow way to feel good about myself. So the devotional soul is devoid of that propensity. And the devotional soul might sometimes, truly from compassion, the devotional soul might sometimes point out some deception or discrepancy or shortcoming, truly from compassion for everyone's self-realization, especially the one that they're pointing at. That's why, like, we hear, like, sometimes Prabhupada would be so heavy, even in a first meeting. And just like, if I tried to do that, and then it's like, oh my God, people do. But like consistently, I can't think of any subject. Like, and people would often be really uncomfortable. But they wouldn't take offense at Prabhupada. What he was saying was like uncomfortable and difficult to hear. They just like sensed he's coming from, he's really caring about me, and he has knowledge. And even if they might resist and argue, because he was devoid of the propensity to criticize. And that's really related to our transformative communication and Sappatova environment. Like in a lot of the interactions, conversations, or lectures, discussions, Prabhupada often doesn't practice the skills that we emphasize. That's because he's living the essence of the skill. So much of the skills is to create that trust. So much of the skills is to create that trust where I trust you're truly caring about me. And then I trust your confidence and your intention. And so by effective, rigorous use of different skills, we create that sacred space. But like a pure devotee like Prabhupada, just by his presence, people got that paraduka dukkha. They got like, he is real compassion, even they couldn't, even if that was like cognitive. And then related to just the family discussion, again, I'm thinking of some examples with Prabhupada that I think integrates the points Keith was expressing and you're expressing, Madhavi, because like Prabhupada would be so respectful to the parents of his disciples. Even there's like with Brahmananda and Gargamuni, their mother visited. She's some Jewish mother from New York. Actually, I met her, Mrs. Sharp. She visited us in Israel in 1987. They had her and Gargamuni, their nephew, was getting, I guess her grandson was getting a bar mitzvah. So they visited us in Tel Aviv when I was temple president in Tel Aviv. But and Prabhupada would tell his students, bow down before your mother. And at the same time, in those same days, there's the pastime with Satsrup, who was Steve Guarino. And then there's a letter, apparently. So Satsrup, his parents, they just disowned him. They just rejected him. And then he wrote to Prabhupada, and Prabhupada wrote back, "You are blessed." So meaning like, yeah, because like, so Prabhupada's student, Satsvarup, did his best to try to care and communicate. And then when the parents just detachment, then Prabhupada, you're free, you're blessed. So both are there. Hare Krishna.
Not one size fits all.
Yeah. It's a very personal, very personal.
Seek Krishna's guidance, Prabhupada's guidance at every moment.
Right.
We may not be able to hear it or follow it or understand it, but if you can get in the habit of seeking Prabhupada's and Krishna's guidance at every moment, then all these different situations where, we're behaving in a certain way here, but completely different way there, but they seem like similar situations, all that becomes reconciled because we're doing what Krishna wants us to do. Trying to please Krishna. So,
I like how you phrased that. Seek to cultivate the habit.
yeah.
I mean, like, okay, because of course, Super Soul and Prabhupada is always giving guidance, but like at least, and I'm not hearing, but like, seek to cultivate the habit. At least that's my go-to. That's my reference point. Make that my second nature. At least aspire.
Yeah, it's a good way to put it. Make it our second nature and then our first nature. Our real nature, which is the reality.
Hiya.
I wanted to say thank you for your class as well, Prabhu. I was really appreciating, I think it was in the beginning that you shared that like ideal family life sometimes starts with that romantic notion and then disturbances arise. And, from the folklore is, putting Krishna at the center. You shared like putting Krishna in the center, like the disturbances will come, but putting Krishna in the center hopefully will help steady. And I'm reflecting on a lot of where I feel like I've been supported by David and just my process with Krishna consciousness. If I related to my current context from the material context, my son has some health issues. And so when I relate to it on a material platform, it's like, oh, that's not my ideal family. Not what I ideally would have wanted. And I'm learning, very slow process, to relate to him on a more detached way. Like, okay, Krishna's child, what Krishna wants for him, his karma, my karma. And it feels, less of that material ideal of what I wanted. And it's more, okay, now from a spiritual perspective, putting Krishna in the middle. Now it becomes more of that ideal family life versus like what I expected 2.5 years ago when I was born. I expected and I'm sure this with David a lot, it's like the Disney fairy tale. Get married, have my child, and we live happily ever after. No disturbances. That's what my little girl wants. And I think that learning the truth that disturbances will arise. It's still challenging for me to say out loud. Like, yeah, disturbances will arise.
Your life will not look like Disney.
Yes, it will not look like Disney.
And what I'm hearing in your expressions, and ideal means more and more, I'm not disturbed by the disturbances.
Yeah.
And that goes with cultivating a deep Krishna consciousness.
I heard Prabhupada saying in lecture today that the devotee sees, when something good comes, he's thinking, oh, it's so wonderful, and he's grateful to Krishna that he's giving, for his service. But if something bad, not so palatable comes, still he's thinking, well, this is what Krishna wants, so why should I let it?
I deserve 100 times worse.
Sometimes he would say that too.
That's a very common type of teaching that I deserve 100 times worse. So Krishna is so kind that I'm just getting a little fraction of it. How bad it could have been.
And that positive attitude can just change everything. Even it can change the health, the physical health. Because the emotional body gives rise, and it's the spirit and the emotional body, and then gives rise to physical, actually. There's so many physical ailments are just manifestations of inappropriate emotional things that are going on, or mental things that are going on. So when your consciousness becomes spiritualized, even your physical health can just transform.
That brings up like part of the question, because I heard you say, not exact word, but to act in ways that Krishna is pleased. So I'm still learning.
I don't know how to do that all the time.
I would love if you had some words to share around like what that might entail.
What does that look like?
Well, we're going to just talk about that. It's cultivation, it's a habit. So it's not just a mental process, but it's a process of the entire body, the intelligence, all the senses, everything being engaged in ways that Krishna is pleased. So I cannot be using my senses in ways that is not pleasing to God, not pleasing to Krishna. And unfortunately, in this world, in this age, there's so much misinformation. So much misinformation. There's so much misguidance, even in the garb of preachers and pastors and priests and rabbis and pundits and yogis and gurus, and there's so much. And I'm just repeating what I heard a couple of days ago. Prabhupada said, saying to some devotees, yes, that is pretty much the norm. That's the norm. It's not that we're what we're in Prabhupada is the norm. It's the opposite. It's the cheating that's the norm. So cheating is the norm. People becoming cheated, that is the norm. So we're surrounded by an atmosphere that is full of falsities. So how to navigate through all of that and rise above it is what this practice, cultivation is about. So our senses, mind, our intelligence, it's a scientific process. That means it works if you follow it properly. And to the degree that we're not able to follow or don't follow, then that brings in disturbances, things that we don't want. So it's a very scientific, wonderful process that Krishna has given us through his representatives, and I'm currently in Krishna Prabhupada, and practice makes perfect. But what does that mean? That in the meantime, there's imperfections. So we have to go through imperfections to get to perfection.
They're saying that the sadhana is the basis of it. I mean, that's the process that Prabhupada has given us as a foundation for our daily lives. You plug into that as perfectly as you can, as best as you can. The more you do that, definitely the rest of your day will be better, and your consciousness will be tuned. Okay, I've been chanting Hare Krishna for 2 hours now, so your consciousness is more tuned into, okay, Krishna was pleased with that. I was trying to be very attentive. Now, and Krishna reciprocates too. That's the thing. Like my husband always said, it's not just a one-way street. Krishna reciprocates with you as well. I see that this devotee is trying to remember me. He's just trying to, make progress. Just trying to help others make progress. let me reciprocate, let me take away this problem, let me give her a bit more facility like that. Let me reward her by purifying her consciousness. You know, it all comes from within, from the super soul. You know, it's not something we do actually. Krishna says, I'm the source of all intelligence and you know, knowledge, remembrance, and forgetfulness. So he's the one actually, like I'm saying, pray. Let me please remember. Let me please do the right thing here. Let me please interact properly in these situations, you know, and gradually. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay.
Jai Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.
Jai.
Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Hi. Thank you.
Thank you,
Hare
everybody.
Krishna.
Hare Krishna.